Back home, former President Trump has made a request to the Supreme Court after an appeals court ruled he does not have immunity in his federal election interference case. Garrett Haake is with us. Garrett, what is the Republican frontrunner asking the justices to do?
Well, Lester, Mr. Trump wants the court to rule that he has immunity from prosecution in this case. And the timeline for the justice's decision could determine if there is a trial before the election. All of this as he's embroiled in new controversy over comments about NATO. Tonight, growing backlash on both sides of the Atlantic over Republican frontrunner Donald Trump's controversial comments about NATO. From the White House.
You've heard from President Biden, gosh, I don't know how many times. We will defend, if needed, every inch of NATO territory. That's what the Commander-in-Chief of the United States ought to be saying when it comes to NATO.
To America's closest ally, the UK.
I think what was said was not a sensible approach.
All after former President Trump recounted talking to a NATO member, suggesting he would encourage Russia to attack a country that had not met its financial obligations to the alliance.
If we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay.
The NATO treaty requires an attack on one country to be treated as an attack on all. While NATO countries have also pledged to spend 2% of their GDP annually on defense, but many don't. And that, Mr. Trump's Republican allies insist, was the point of his remarks.
That's simply the president telling NATO countries they need to step up and play their part. It's that simple.
But NATO's Secretary General saying Mr. Trump's statement, quote, undermines all of our security. Meanwhile, the White House on offense tonight against the scathing accounts of President Biden's, quote, diminished faculties in that report by special counsel Robert Hur, which described Mr. Biden as, quote, an elderly man with a poor memory. Today, the president laughing it off with supporters.
I've been around. I know I don't look like it, but I've been around a while. I do remember that.
And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, speaking to Lester today, defending the president.
He's pretty sharp, and he's got a very good grasp of the issues. He asks, I think, very pertinent questions.
Were you surprised to hear that?
Yeah, dialogue, yeah, it was. Because it's not characteristic what I've seen.
Garrett Haake, NBC News, Washington.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.